Good morning and happy Saturday. It is a cold day in Denver today, so hopefully you all are staying warm and didn't get too cold out there shoveling all that snow off the sidewalks. I got up this morning and went and taught a class over at Rebel, so yeah, it was a great Saturday morning, but a very snowy one. So I wanted to go through several topics today, but I'm going to first start with how to calculate macros. And I did touch very briefly on this when I sent out macros to most of you, just about multipliers and calorie deficit. But I'm going to go in detail here of how to calculate macros because honestly, it's not really a secret. To be honest, there is stuff out there on the internet too, and there's a lot of macros calculators out there. I've played around with several of them, and I can't say that I necessarily agree with the calculation of all of them, but in general, the rules of how to calculate macros are kind of the same. I use the Precision Nutrition approach to calculating macros. They have a really in-depth macro calculator on their website as well. I'm going to give you the steps of how I calculated your macros. Any calculation that someone is giving to you, whether it be from me or another macros nutrition coach, please remember that this is just a starting point. So everyone is so different. Every client I've ever worked with has something different going on. There's lots of reasons for this. Many of us have different body composition, activity levels, hormones, maybe a medical condition, the way you're absorbing foods, gluten intolerances, dairy intolerance. We use all of this information as a starting point, really. I have been tracking macros for 3 years now, and I have adjusted my macros depending on different training I'm doing or different things going on in my body. But you know what we're doing is we want to make sure we're accurate with the macros we set. And the reason we want to set those macros and follow those macros for a given period of time is that we want to collect information. And we want to make adjustments once we've collected that information. What we're working here is something called outcome-based decision making. So once you've been tracking on one specific set of macros, I want you to then collect the information, sit down, and it's time to make some decisions. Is this macros working? Are these macros working? Or are these macros not working for me? Okay, I need to change something. I'm going to post a separate video on whether or not you want to change your macronutrients. It's a little bit different. And during our Rebel Reboot program, I didn't actually adjust hardly any of you in macros. And I did this on purpose. You needed time to gather information. And now you need to start asking these questions. Is this working? Is this not working for me? I think oftentimes we get macros and then we jump to that decision making before we've collected the information, which is why I didn't adjust many of your macros. Like I said, that was purposeful. I'm going to tell you how I calculated the macros so that if you are going to make adjustments, you know how to do it. I will also be posting like a spreadsheet formula-driven tool that you can use. It's very simple for calculating macros. If you are going to use a calculate macros tool online, I highly recommend the Precision Nutrition one. It's one that I trust. It's an approach that I think will align very well with the information we've been learning in Rebel Reboot. All right, so I'm going to tell you how to calculate them. With all of that said, I will start with the example I'm going to give in the video is going to be fat loss macros, okay? But I'm going to provide you information as well on maintenance macros as well as muscle gain. So I'm going to focus on fat loss macros for a little bit here. Most of you are most interested in fat loss macros right now. And notice that I am not saying weight loss. So fat loss versus weight loss, right? Remember, fat loss and weight loss are two different things, especially when you combine like a workout regimen and you're active and all the work we've been doing, we want to focus on fat loss. So worry less about the scale. I do understand that it's great to see the numbers. It's one very good indicator of progress, but it's only one tool that we use to measure. And I've said this several times. So continue to focus on how you're feeling, how your clothes are fitting, how you're performing in your workouts. And then another thing to point out is macro calculations are based upon your size. So like I said, there's a lot of different things going on with everyone, but really the basis of it is size of the person. So tall people, you're going to get to eat more. Smaller, petite people, you're going to be eating less. That is intentional. All right, so as far as the calculation goes, you are going to start by calculating calories, okay, number of calories. So like I said, we're going to focus fat loss macros for a little bit. Number one, in order to calculate your fat loss macros, you're going to take your current weight and multiply it by 10 to 12. So there's a range there, and that's so that you can adjust when you need to adjust macros. So no need to go lower than a 10 multiplier. It's nice to have that range. If 10 is too low and it's difficult to be compliant, you may want to work toward that 12 number or somewhere in between. That is going to be your caloric standpoint, okay? The first thing you're going to do once you have defined what your caloric starting point is you are going to find your protein number. So we find the protein number first. You need to be eating about 1 gram per pound of body weight, okay? If you're still having a lot of trouble with that number, most of you are meeting those protein numbers and you've been doing a great job. But if you're leaning toward eating less meat, or I would say definitely if you are a 100% vegan eater, you can lower that protein number to as low as 0.7 gram per pound of body weight. Okay, I do not recommend going lower than that. We need the macros to be pretty protein dense in order to curb hunger and cravings and work that caloric deficit or that starting point for fat loss macros. Once you have that protein number, you're going to basically calculate back into your numbers. So in my example, say you are 150 pounds today, and I am going to take a 10 times multiplier for fat loss macros. So that would indicate that you're going to start at 1,500 calories, 10 times 150, right, equals 1,500. Now, we're going to set the protein number. That's the first macro you set. My starting number that I'm going to try out is 150 grams of protein because, as I said, I recommend 1 gram per pound of body weight, right? 150 pound person equals 150 grams of protein. Now, 1 gram of protein macronutrient equals approximately 4 calories. Therefore, given the protein goal of 150 grams of protein, you are eating approximately 600 calories in protein. And remember, I calculated 1,500 total in the beginning, and then 150 grams of protein times that 4 equals 600 calories. That leaves us with about 900 calories remaining to assign between fats and carbohydrates. If you're looking for the percentage that you want to put into MyFitnessPal, you're going to take that 600 protein calories, right? 150 times 4, and divide it by 1,500 total calories. So 600 divided by 1,500, and that gives you 40%. Many of you are working 40% protein macros, and that's how I got to it. If you're not working 40%, I adjusted something intentionally. Remember that everyone is a little bit different. All right, once you have your total calories, your protein macros, next up you're gonna work fat numbers. So with my remaining 900 calories, that's my 1,500 total less my 600 protein, my remaining 900 calories, I'm going to calculate my fat at 30%. If you like leaner cuts of meat, you're not wanting to eat a lot of fattier foods, good heart health, those things, I recommend starting at 30%. 30% is a really good starting point for almost all clients, honestly. In the graphic, you can also see that there is a little range that's recommended, and that falls in line with precision nutrition approach as well and flexible eating. In the graphic, you see that you can take your body weight and multiply it by 0.25 to 0.4 to find your fat grams. It's basically saying 25% to 40%. My recommended number here is 30% for almost everyone. So if you were to take 150 pounds, multiply that by 0.3 or 30%, you land at 50 grams of fat. 50 grams of fat is your macro set for fats. Fat conversion to calories is 9. So if you're looking for estimated fat calories, you're going to take those grams and multiply it times 9, and that'll give you 450 calories. Okay, so 450 calories, you get to the same place if you take 30% and multiply it by your total calories, 1,500. 1,500 times 30% is 450 calories. So we've determined that our fat loss macros for fats is 30% or 50 grams. Okay, make sure that's right. Yes, 50 grams of fat. 30%, 50 grams in a 1,500 calorie macro plan. Lots of math. Again, I've posted this in words in the Facebook group. It's in a graphic, and then I'm going to put it in an Excel spreadsheet if you want to play around with that. Now, the last thing you do in calculating macros is you set your carbohydrates, and you have whatever calories are left to assign to carbs. So in the example, we chose 1,500 total calories. We need 600 to do 40% of protein. We need 450 for fat, 30%. So 1,500 minus 600 minus 450, and you take that number and divide the 1,500 minus the 600 minus the 450 gives you 450 calories remaining. With those 450 calories, we're going to assign to carbohydrates. The 1 gram of carbohydrates converts to 4 calories. It's the same calculation as protein. So 450 divided by 4 equals 112.5 or 113 grams of carbs. The percentage is calculated based off of the 450 calories divided by the 1,500 total, and you get to 30%. So all of this math leaves us with 30% fat, 40% protein, 30% carbohydrates at a 1,500 total calorie. That's all you need to put into MyFitnessPal to do this. Okay? And that's at a 10 times fat loss multiplier. That's how it works. I know it's a little bit of math. It sounds a little more complicated than it is, but that's how it works. Okay, you do the same process in maintenance macros. However, rather than a 10 to 12 times multiplier that we used for fat loss, for maintenance, you work 13 to 16 times multiplier. Okay, so you're eating a little bit more. But basically the calculation works the same way. The fat loss, we're really just working caloric deficit. Maintenance, that 13 to 16 times your current body weight, that is maintenance. You're not going to necessarily lose fat. You're not going to gain fat. You kind of like where you're at, but it's healthy, it's sustainable, and it keeps energy in the body. If you are working toward muscle gain, and I do have a couple of you working muscle gain as well, you are going to take a 16 to 18 multiplier. And I want to talk about this because that is a crap ton of food, right? It's a lot of food. But the way we do macros, think about how intentional the way you're distributing that food is. So we call this intentional eating. We aren't just eating a bunch, right? We're not just eating 16 times 18 our body weight and whatever the hell we want. We are eating intentionally. So in muscle gain, you're eating quite a bit more, but you're eating very optimal apportionments of each macronutrient. So I want you to think about that. I don't want you to be scared of muscle gain macros, because muscle gain macros don't translate to fat gain, okay? If you're working muscle gain macros, I want to just continue to encourage you to stay very active. You need to be strength training and resistance training. Maybe working toward some kind of goal or competition or something like that. Or if you just need to gain muscle and bulk up a little bit, especially any of the male clients that I'm working with, 16 to 18, that's the number. Once you set the macros, just want to remind you, and I've said this several times now, you need to collect information by sticking to it for a few weeks. A few weeks is really optimal. Give it a real try, collecting information about yourself and then adjust, but try sticking into these ranges of multipliers. I oftentimes have clients come to me and say, I don't think these macros are working, but it's been like 4 or 5 days. Okay, you haven't gathered enough information about whether or not the macros are working. And there's a lot of components in this, right? We talked about the fat whoosh of body or water retention in the body. A lot of these things can be going on. You need to give the body time to adjust to the macros. If you have any questions about macro calculation, please let me know. I posted a graphic. I posted an example calc in Words on Facebook, in the Facebook group. I'll share that in the blog post in the email that goes out this week. Maybe this video helps. I'm trying to give you this information in many different ways so that depending on what type of learner you are, you get this information. We'll also talk about carb cycling, some intuitive eating habits, and then whether or not you're needing to adjust your macros. So it's a little different than just the calculation of macros. Feel free to post any questions you have in the comments, and thanks for listening.